Hello and welcome to Life, but Make It Business, where we talk to business professionals, not only about their experience in business, but how it applies to just everyday life situations. My name is Sangmi, and I'm a second year grad student in the William Mary MBA program, and I work at my family's business, which is a martial arts school. I'm here with my host, Shannon.
I am Shannon. I'm also a second year MBA student at William and Mary. I am a project manager for a small to mid-sized consulting and digital transformation firm specializing in geospatial geographic information systems, and, Army land management, programming, and project management.
Cool. So we're here with our guest, Professor Elizabeth Foster, who we had, I don't know when we had her in our first semester at William Mary, and she has over 25 years of public accounting, but I guess she didn't get tired of accounting. So she joined the faculty at William Mary in 2010 and teaches financial accounting, advanced auditing. Why we invited her today was what struck me when we took her class was not only did she teach us obviously accounting, but also a lot of it, she dropped some truth bombs with how accounting can apply to your everyday life. But thank you so much for being here with us, Professor Foster.
Thank you both for inviting me. It's really an honor and great to see you again.
Yeah. I remember like when we were talking about ways that companies hid their money or whatever through accounting, it just showed a lot of, kind of the dark side of humanity, right?
Yeah.
So I just wanted your insight on how you kind of kept positive, because we noticed you're a very positive and energetic person. And I just was like, wow, how does she do that when she's seen kind of maybe some scumbags?
Quite a few, but they will remain nameless on this podcast. Sangmi, I think in any profession, when you work with people, when you work long enough, you do see the underside of that profession. And certainly in auditing and accounting, you do see the underside. We have a phrase in auditing that we learn from auditing class straight through and really discuss it almost every day. And it's called professional skepticism. And when a lot of people hear that term, they think that it means that you're supposed to be skeptical about the integrity of who you're auditing or who you're working with. And that's not exactly the definition. The definition is that you're not supposed to have a bias that they're either telling you the truth or that they're not telling you the truth. And that's the real definition of professional skepticism. And it's really a foundation of auditing that when you are performing tasks and you're essentially looking to see if people have told you the truth or not, you're supposed to have the attitude that they're neither telling you the truth nor lying to you, but it's your job to figure out which one it is. Mm-hmm. And so that maybe gets back to your question, how do I keep that attitude? Because I have been told that I'm the ultimate optimist, and I really believe that I am. And yet, in my career path, I have been trained to not assume that it's either an optimistic or a pessimistic situation, that it's my job to figure it out. And so I have found that if I practice professional skepticism, it doesn't get in the way of my eternal optimism, which I still am able to show.
Which is incredible. I do have to say, I mean, the level of optimism and energy that you brought to a financial accounting class really was just, beyond the pale when it comes to just classes in general, but such a dry subject. And I think Sangmi and I are a good example of yin and yang, in that she's much better at the financial stuff than I am. And I had a very difficult time. She taught me a lot in our study groups. I had a really hard time in your class, but if it wasn't for your level of communication and your energy and your optimism and your faith in me,
Mhm.
I have made it through.
Yeah.
You know, so I think, and maybe that was your professional skepticism in me, is she gonna
You know,
make it or not? It's some like Schrodinger's accountant.
exactly. You know, we've said really from the first day of class that accounting is a very humbling discipline. And it is humbling when you are learning it the first time. It is humbling when you've practiced it for 25 years.
Mhm.
And that enables me to have a little compassion for those that are seeing this for the first time, because again, I worked in the career and was humbled every day of practicing. And I don't think that's just accounting. I think a lot of the paths that we choose, if we have the right attitude, we want to be better at it, but we also want to learn something every day. And
Mhm.
when you put yourself in that position, it's very humbling, because you will. And
Yep.
that means that you'll have some preconceived ideas that won't actually turn out to be correct.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's awesome. I also, like Shannon mentioned earlier, your level of communication was super great during our class. And so I wondered if, you learned that from accounting, or you're just a good communicator in general, but especially like what advice do you give to people on how to communicate well, like you do?
I think that I would have two things that I would share. There's no secret sauce. And I think one of them is to be prepared. And sometimes my students make fun of me, and y'all might have too, but you know that I'm very prepared. I wrote out everything that we were going to talk about and do. I tried to be spontaneous, but I was very prepared. And I think one trick to being prepared is, or to communicating well, is to know that if you ever get stuck in whatever you're doing, you can go back to your notes. You don't have
Mhm.
to live and read from your notes, but you can always go back to them because they're there. And for me, because I've been doing this so long, it really just is kind of a reminder that it's there. But when you prepare, you will communicate much better than if you are not prepared. I think the second thing that I find in communication, and I probably did learn this in my years in public accounting, it's very important to have in your mind the big ideas that you want to communicate.
Mm.
And maybe even that you write them down, that you write down the 3 big ideas in one sentence of what it is that you want to communicate. I had a supervisor in public accounting that was trying to coach me in communication, particularly with my clients.
Mm.
And she said that whenever you speak to a client, you think that you have a certain amount of time, but you might not. And especially if you're an auditor. And so a lot of times we would be invited to speak to a client or to an audit committee, and we might think that we would have 30 minutes or 45 minutes. And then we get in, and then they say, oh, Elizabeth, you have 5 minutes to tell us everything you want to. Well, what am I going to do? I'm not going to spend 5 minutes introducing myself. I'm
Mhm.
going to go to those 3 big ideas, and I'm going to read them, add 2 sentences, go to the second one, read it, go to the third one, read it, so that I know that the most important things that I have to say, whether I had 45 minutes or whether I had 5 minutes, still gets communicated. And I think in communication, at least I have a tendency to wander. And if I have my 3 big ideas, I'm less inclined to wander. You
Mhm.
know, I know what those ideas are, and I've written them out. I've prepared for them. And then if I have 5 minutes or 25 minutes or 45 minutes, it's okay. And I think that that has helped me, because when I go into a classroom, I know what the big ideas are that I want to get across. And if the questions coming back to me are on the big idea, we are going to hang out on that big idea because it's so important. If there are other things that are less important, but of interest to a particular student, I'm going to not tend to talk about that as long. And I think that leads to time management, which is also a little bit of a key. But I really think the preparedness and the big ideas have helped me keep myself organized.
I think it makes a lot of sense. It reminds me a little bit of, in the military, they call it a bluff, which is bottom line up front. And so that'll be the first slide.
Yes.
And, it's almost like it's just your points.
Yes.
And they're, very much, here's what we're going to talk about. And then you talk about it, and then you review what you talked about, and you have questions.
Yeah.
Which is a great way to do that. And I, think that's very applicable. And having taken, your class, I think you really did that in a super effective way. Because, it's a lot of information too, that you're putting out there to these very diverse group of students with a very diverse background.
Right. I think that I love bluff. I've never heard of it, but I love that. I think the other thing that's effective about bluff, bottom line, up front, love that first, up front first.
We love acronyms.
Love it. I think that if you do that and you get your first main point, and people in your audience, whether it's an audience of 3 or an audience of 40, if they understand that first main point, you'll get that. And you will read from the audience that you can now go to the second big point, and then the next one. And I think that's also important, is kind of reading the group that you're talking to. And if you start with your main point number 1 and you have these blank stares, you're going to spend the whole time on point 1 because they haven't gotten it yet. But sometimes you'll go and you won't get the blank stares till the main point number 4. And I think that's important too in communication, is making sure that you spend the time where you need to spend the time.
That really struck me, what you said about sometimes you would go in thinking you had 30 minutes and then they're like, oh, 5, which, I teach martial arts, so I'm not necessarily in that situation. But for our listeners who are, maybe young business professionals and people who, I've been talking to some of my friends lately, they have imposter syndrome. They feel really like out of their depth. They feel like, some people still feel that way, even deep into their careers. But especially, what advice would you give those people with your experience, especially in accounting, which, is a very, I feel like it's an intense field, but I mean, you can correct me on that.
It is pretty intense. Well, I think, once I started practicing having these big ideas in my mind, I planned that if I was going into an hour meeting, I planned, what if I only have 5 minutes? And even in like an employee evaluation, where you think you're going in and you have 1 hour with your boss and you think that you're going to be having this back and forth, and doesn't it happen every time? Oh, sorry, Shannon, I don't have time for you. 5 minutes. You get 5 minutes. And you have to know what is going to come out of your mouth if you have 5 minutes. And I think practicing for that and assuming that it's going to happen has helped me, that it then doesn't throw you off as much when it does happen. It's like, yeah, I knew this was going to happen. And so you're still able to have those couple of points. But it happens a lot in evaluations where your boss just puts you as the lower priority. And honestly, okay, I'll be honest, they're doing this on purpose. They're hoping that you won't come in with your big 3 ideas, and that you'll wander for 5 minutes, and then your boss will say, oops, sorry, ran out of time.
right. They're
And sometimes you meet with people that have exactly that plan.
Yep. Yeah, I think they're hoping that you're not going to drop a bomb in their meeting. Yeah, I have been there. You get, almost to the end, you think you were kind of on the agenda in the beginning, and then they push it, push it, push it. And then, next thing you know, everyone is kind of zoned out and you're the very last person. And they go, oh yeah,
Oh yeah.
Cubs. Yeah. We've got this audit thing. No
Right.
biggie. Yeah.
Right. That is, it really does. And you can sharpen your communication skills if you plan that that's going to happen, and what are the key messages that you want to communicate, because you can communicate 2 or 3 key messages as you are getting up out of a chair and walking out of a room. You can still say those messages in a short amount of time.
Mm-hmm.
That's super awesome. Especially like I see that you have experience with clients versus students, right? I think with students there's a little bit more. It sounds like with clients, like you have to cater to what they're doing versus you do have a little more power over students. But at the same time, like there's still that level of, like you said, preparation in each case. Besides the preparation and the big ideas, do you have any other advice from accounting that you have learned?
Well, I was thinking about that. I don't know how many accountants you know. Many accountants tend to be risk averse. They don't like to take risks. They're very conservative in many aspects of their life. And I am not an exception to that. I have not grown up thinking that taking risk was a great thing. Having said that, some advice that I would give is about taking chances, and that many of the big chances or gambles that we take in our lives don't turn out to be as big as we built them up in real time. And I think I wish that I had understood that a little bit better earlier in my career. But I think not being afraid to take some chances and do some different things, and heaven forbid, fail, have them not work out as well, it is something that I would love to communicate to really anyone. One time when I did practice that pretty well is in my retirement from KPMG. I had worked at KPMG for 25 years. I really had a satisfying career. I knew in 2007 that it was time for me to leave. And I knew that I wanted to do something different, which is the reason that I left. It wasn't, I just knew that I wanted to do something different than what I was doing. And I knew that if I didn't leave at the time I left, I wouldn't have enough time to really create whatever that second career was going to be. I retired not knowing at all what I was going to do. And a lot of people don't know that, because they say to me, "You're such a great fit. You must have known exactly the day you left public accounting that you were going to teach accounting, and this must have been your master grand plan." And it wasn't, I had no plan, zero plan. So when I retired in 2007, my son was finishing 5th grade. And I teased that no one else gave me a retirement present, so I bought one of my own, and I bought an RV. And my husband and my son and I spent 10 weeks driving around the country, visiting national parks, hiking, and it was the best thing ever. That was my only grand plan in leaving. And I knew that that was a 10-week plan. After that, I had no idea what the plan was. And I don't have regrets about that. I knew that I would land on my feet. And so part of it is having that confidence that you will land on your feet. And even if you go to pick something that isn't going to work out, you're still going to land on your feet. And that's, I guess, the part to communicate. The story of being involved with William and Mary is that when I was working at KPMG, I did a lot of recruiting and hiring students from college campuses. And William and Mary, of course, was one of the places that we loved to hire students from. And so I knew a lot of the accounting faculty. And a few months after I had retired and came back from my RV trip, by the way, I did that 2 times, but you can ask me about that later. So one of the faculty members called me. He said, I know that you retired, and I wanted to tell you that we have this new building at William and Mary called Miller Hall, and it's where our business school is. And he said, I would love for you to come and have lunch with me and tour Miller Hall. And I thought, how great is that? So I go. I had known him for 20 years. And so I showed up, and he gave me this great tour of Miller Hall, which those of you that have never seen it, please go see it. It's lovely. It's where the business school at William and Mary is housed. And we had this great tour, and we had a nice lunch. Well, the funny thing about that conversation is I thought it was a tour and a lunch, but it was a job interview. Really? So it was. And he wanted me to come teach, but he didn't tell me that. He just said, I want to show you the building and I want you to come have lunch. And it was only in about the last 20 minutes that we were together that I realized he's interviewing me. He's asking me questions. And that conversation started a discussion between the two of us about whether I would come and teach classes at William and Mary. And that was the plan. But that call didn't happen until 6 months after I had retired. And so kind of funny there.
That's terrific. I really dream of getting a camper and driving around the country. Very, very Steinbeck-ish, esque personally.
Don't give up on that dream, Shannon.
Someday.
Because, oh my gosh, it is. So, I had planned this 10 weeks. We bought the RV. We went, all of us had the time of our lives. On the last day that we were hiking before we were going to drive home, our son said, I want to do this again next summer.
Nice.
And my husband and I were like, what? Like, we kind of made you do this year. And he said, no, I want to do it next summer. And we said, okay, we've heard you, but we're not going to have this discussion until your Christmas break. And we want you to go back to school, because we were sure he would get back in school. He'd be with his friends. I definitely don't want to be with my parents in the summer. So don't you know, first day of Christmas vacation, he comes home and he says, I want to talk about our trip. And so we did it again for another 10 weeks. And we did a couple of things different. We had a rule that we weren't going to go to any of the same places we had gone the first time. Mm-hmm. And so glad we did. We did break the rule one time because our favorite place for all 3 of us, we had to go back again. So we did that. That was Glacier National Park in Montana. Cool. But other than that, we did not go to any of the same places. And the other thing was, my son, at that point being 13 years old, planned the majority of the trip and where we would go.
That's cool.
And that was also really, it was wonderful for all of us, but a real highlight. And I couldn't have done that if I had not kind of gotten off the treadmill of a job, and kind of carving out that space and time was fabulous. No regrets, and really glad I did it. So hang on to that dream if you have it.
Definitely. I definitely will. In that vein, I have, seen a lot of students in grad school who, you talk about not being afraid to fail. And, I tend to have a couple hobbies on the side that I practice that I am terrible at.
Mm-hmm.
And I love them, but I'm not good.
Yep.
But I've experienced, and I see a lot of my classmates who seem to have a very, very difficult time and hold a lot of anxiety around being correct.
Right.
How do you help students kind of, or, guide them through that, because it's not necessarily the answer or the end game that we're
Exactly.
shooting for here. It's
That's right.
the journey, and it's, can we think critically about these things, and as we know in companies, you collaborate a lot, so you're not on an island,
Right.
and school's the same way. But how do you foster that in students who have been for years really they've been perfect, they're
Right.
coming out of school very highly ranked, and they don't fail?
Right.
How do you kind of encourage them? It's okay to make mistakes,
Yeah.
it's okay to mess up.
Yeah.
How do you kind of guide them, I guess, and
Yeah.
anxiety?
There's an interesting book that I would like to recommend to your listeners. It's called The Passion Paradox. The Passion Paradox. And it speaks, it is a counterintuitive book about things that we've thought about. And their premise is that particularly our business culture these days, tells people that are looking for jobs, look for the right fit. In other words, the authors of the book believe that we are feeding this instant gratification monster that lives on our shoulder, that we have to be perfect, we have to find the perfect job, we have to find the perfect fit, we have to do all the things that are going to gratify us right now.
Mm-hmm.
And they have done some very interesting research with top performing athletes in many different fields. And they ask the question of the top people in their athletic fields, did you always know that golf, tennis, whatever the field is, was going to be your field and your fit? And they often say no.
Mm-hmm.
And what they have learned is that the fit comes from the hard work. It's not the vice versa.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I wish I had read this book way earlier than I did. It's relatively new, so it wasn't out there. But it really has caused me to pause, because I have often given students the advice of looking for the right fit, and looking for where you fit in, and finding what feels good to you. But it might be those things that don't feel right at all, but your hard work makes it so.
Right.
And if I can reflect for a minute on how I have internalized this to my experience, when I graduated from college, undergrad, with an accounting degree, that's when I started my career at KPMG. And at the time, you had to have 2 years of experience to get a CPA license. And so the threshold that you would go into your new job right after school is that you wanted to work for 2 years. And you just hoped that you could make it 2 years. So when I started my job, I was sure that I was going to hate it And I kept telling myself from day one, 2 years. That's exactly right. 2 years. It's just 2 years. I would break it down, 24 months. I just kept breaking it down. You can do it. I decided to give myself that 2 years and really work hard, which I did. And at the 2-year mark, when a number of my friends were leaving and celebrating, yay, we made 2 years, I was like, man, I kind of like this. So maybe I'll just give it one more year. And I did the one more year thing for 23 years after that. and what I realized is I didn't have a fit. I didn't know, there was no instant gratification with this job other than if I did it for 2 years, I would get a CPA license. But I realize now that these authors of the Passion Paradox are exactly right. It was the hard work that I invested, and I got okay at it such that I was continuing to be promoted, that it actually became a satisfying and gratifying fit. So I would tell students now, striving to be perfect, even though you've done it all your life, is not a good goal. It's really a very unsatisfying and extremely stressful goal. And to have a goal to try something that you really might not be good at, Shannon, I relate to you saying that you have a couple hobbies that you're terrible at. One of my most fun hobbies, particularly a decade ago, was scrapbooking. It was very popular. My kid was young. We had, and I am horrible at scrapbooking, but I tell you what, I've got 35 scrapbooks and some of them are this, that, and they are there. I was a terrible scrapbooker. Maybe I got marginally better, but you know what? It was what I wanted to do. And I was the only one that would say, I'm doing this because I want to. And I don't have to be great. I can look at these scrapbooking magazines and see all these amazing pictures that don't look anything like my scrapbooks. But I got that satisfaction. And that's what we're supposed to be about, not about being perfect. We're on a journey. And the journey zigs and zags, and we don't get to decide when to zig or when to zag. The journey is there, and, we don't have to be perfect.
That is really striking coming from an accountant with all those perfect numbers.
Your numbers have to be perfect, Sang-Mi.
I mean, even then, though.
Yeah, I mean, this is why we're doing this podcast, so that you have the chance to, reach a wider audience and tell people what you've learned, because a lot of people, like you said, I wish I had known this. I wish. And for me, I've experienced it a lot of times, sometimes it has to come from the right person, right? If you're, as a parent, you probably understand, like, I told you that, and you only listen to it now that it comes from your soccer coach, right?
Of course.
Yeah. I have that with me too, right? A lot of parents are like, I told my kid that 10,000 times, but they'll listen to Master Sang-Mi.
That's right.
It takes a village, It
does. It does. And it takes, frankly, a little bit of age. I have a lot of age, but, I think we mature on our journey, and, it does. It takes that longer view. And when you're in your 20s, the long view is, a month or two. But as you age, the longer view becomes longer. And then hopefully you give yourself more grace to fail and to make some mistakes and not get so excited about it.
I definitely agree with that. I think as you just get older and you have those more experiences, and things just don't become such a big deal. And like you said, you experience these things and you realize that it's not the end of the world.
Exactly.
If you do take a chance and it doesn't work out, you're still here, you're still okay.
That's right.
Every day, one of my favorite Marcus Aurelius quotes is, it's only one day. Everything good and bad.
That's right.
Only lasts one day.
That's
and so we've got to, and while that's exciting, but also sad, it is what it is, and you keep going. So No, great stoic.
I think
That's-
treasuring each day too.
Yep.
You know, we're in a season where so many of us have experienced losses on all fronts, and I think that one thing I've seen is really appreciating each day. It is only a day, but it is only a day, right?
Yep.
Like, you know, where do you emphasize, and making sure that we're really treasuring each of those days, even when parts of it don't work out like we want it to.
I will also say it's kind of a cultural shift with the perfectionism and the
Yes.
side hustles and
Yes.
stuff. So
Yes.
like, I wonder, like a lot of my kids that I teach in martial arts, I do have to get them out of the mindset, like, you have to, the only way to like really guaranteed fail is not even trying, right?
Yeah.
A lot of times. And even like nowadays when they get black belt, I don't mind if they quit because I'm like, hey, you still accomplished something. Even like one belt up, you still tried.
Yeah.
And that's really important because I know a lot of, people might be like, oh, you didn't make it to black belt. I'm like, that doesn't matter to me that they didn't make it to black belt. It's just that they did level up a few belts and hopefully got something from it.
That's exactly right.
Yeah. But we're gonna go and throw in a wild card question for you. I'm sure you listened to the previous interview and thought, oh, I'm gonna be asked that question. Well, too
Horse
bad.
size ducks
No.
and duck side
No.
horses.
No. I
got this
wouldn't have.
from-
I give you way more credit than that, Sang Mei.
So,
Way more.
our wild card question for you is, if you were a color, what sound would you make?
I would be pink making twinkly bell sounds because I'm kind of a glittery girl, and pink is just such a sassy color, and twinkly is like, yeah, it'd be pink twinkly.
Nice.
That'd be hot pink.
Nice.
Yeah.
You did
I
not
love
skip-
it.
That's
I
awesome.
love it. And we, and I will take that second to, to mention, and and I talked about this a little bit. And it's very unfortunate, and this is kind of an aside, how, when we talk about women's style and fashion, it's often very superficial, but, you should know that as growing up, I didn't fantasize to be kind of a princess person, and there's nothing wrong with that, but I was very kind of working 9 to 5, fantasize about a business suit, and and you are probably, top fashionable professor for the Flex program. You were always very well put together, and I have to,
Impeccable, y'all.
you owned that. And from someone who's climbing that ladder and trying to, seeing that confidence was really inspiring. And I'm sure I'm not the only, young woman in the class who felt that way. But not in a superficial way, because you own it. And, and all of that sparkly twinkle bells, you own that. And I think that that's really important. We're going through a lot of changes socially for women. And I feel like we're really coming into our own in a really strong way, in the way that we can be ourselves in the professional environment. So, I do want to mention that. And I think it's fantastic, to have that confidence and to exude that, and it makes a difference. And, it made a difference to me, and I'm sure it made a difference to other people in the class as well. So, just my little
Thank you for that.
There, because it I loved it, and I loved your suits. I think they're awesome, and I can't wait to I always say to myself, what level am I going to get to when I can like buy a really nice suit? You know what I mean? Like, when can I get to that place?
Yep.
So hopefully, I'll get to that place.
You will. You definitely will, and you'll own it.
Yes.
Yeah.
I love how Shannon described that, especially, people do think of fashion as like a weak thing, but like it really is quite powerful in building your confidence and showing people that you can, like you said, be yourself And yeah, thank you again for not only your awesome accounting teaching, but also your amazing outfits. Because man, they're highlight of my week. They really were.
Yes, they're terrific.
Yikes.
No,
Oh, one of the highlights. One of the
they're
highlights.
so
Okay,
great.
one.
They're so
They're all the
no,
highlights.
they're fantastic. And your class was always fantastic too. You know, like we mentioned before, your energy was always just so good and so high. And it's a 3-hour class once a week from 7 to 10 p.m. It's rough. So, you know, you can't beat your energy, your communication, you know, and your patience. I personally thank you for your patience.
Well, you all are very kind.
I am not good at finance.
To share that.
So I think that is pretty much, you know, wraps it up. If you have any kind of lingering recommendations or tools that you like, or additional books or anything like that you would have to recommend to students, we would love to get that from you now. And
Well, I would say the most impactful book that I read early in my career was Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. I know that this is probably maybe still standard reading in business schools, but Stephen Covey has a habit. One of his 7 habits is first things first. And that turned into its own book called First Things First.
Yep.
And in that book, Stephen Covey draws a strong distinction between urgency and importance. And we live in a time where those around us, particularly in business, want everything to be urgent, 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 urgent. And Stephen Covey makes the argument that sometimes people spend all their time doing the things that are urgent and few of the things that are important. Now, sometimes he does a quadrant, and his quadrant is urgent and important, urgent, not important, important, not urgent, not urgent, not important. And he says, of course, that urgent and important should get done first. But he says the quadrant that gets ignored too often in our business, and for me in my personal life, is that quadrant that is important but not urgent. Important but not urgent. That would be time spent with family and friends, time spent to help others that are having a tough time. These aren't things that people are yelling at you and telling you their deadlines and they have to be done by 3 o'clock today, but they are more important than many of the tasks that are on your long to-do list for the day. And that concept for me is very profound, because we do need to focus more on important matters, that particularly those that don't seem to be urgent. Now, in a different economy, in a spiritual economy, they might be urgent, but in our business economy, they may not be. And that is something that, if you have not thought about that concept very much, I would encourage you to read either of the 7 Habits book. He addresses this concept in both books. He addresses it more in the First Things First book, but that's a really powerful concept. And that is a business concept that works as well in business as in our personal lives. And that's what your podcast is all about. So
I love that. What did you say? The spiritual economy.
Yes.
Of that thought. That's such a good thing. I'm gonna kind of like look into. I love the concept.
Yeah, I just think that some of the things that we do that are not urgent are more important from a spiritual perspective that we do, not only for others, but for ourselves. When we do that, we're also contributing to our own well-being as well as to others. But you know, those things that we do, they're never urgent. They're never on a deadline. They're never about people saying, please come help me. I need you to talk to me or do something before a certain time. No, they're the things that are not loud. I wrote an email not long ago to someone about encouraging them to listen to the quiet voices or the non-existent voices rather than the loud voices. And we're in a world where there are a lot of very loud voices, and we need to listen to the quiet voices or even the silent voices.
Thank you so much, Professor, for all your words of wisdom and for coming to our podcast today. I got a lot out of it, and I'm glad we got to spend some time with you outside of class.
Sangmi, thank you very much. Shannon, thank you very much. I'm honored to be here with you, and I wish you the greatest of success in finishing in your MBA program, and I know that I'll see you soon. Thank you so much.
Thank you.